Hi, debaters. So today we're going to be talking about what is highlighting and why do you do it in debate? Why would you do it? So this is a pretty important topic because I think a lot of your judges would like you to highlight evidence to make it more efficient. And also, if you're having problems reading all of the evidence in one of your speeches, like getting through the full 1AC, then you need to do highlighting to make your speeches more efficient. So when would we use highlighting in debate? So there's a couple different times. If you want to reduce the amount of time it takes to read your arguments in a speech to make it more effective and more efficient, you would definitely use highlighting. If you wanted to make your evidence easier to read, just easier to find the words that you're trying to read, you would use highlighting. And if you wanted to make your arguments clearer, to use less words and get straight to the point, you would also definitely use highlighting. So for example, I'm going to use the online version to highlight, but your evidence looks like this, right? It comes printed out in this nice binder like this. You would take an actual physical highlighter and use it to highlight the words and sentences that you're going to read in the debate. So that way it's easier to see what you want to read and it'll take you less time to actually read through it. So let's do a little example of what it would look like to highlight some evidence. So you have this evidence in your actual evidence packet. This is card number 8 on the affirmative. It's an impact card for the environment advantage. And the claim it makes is that loss of fresh water destroys land, air, and water biodiversity, leading to mass extinctions, including humans, from Wetlands International 2010. So you don't need to highlight this if you don't want to. If you like to highlight it just so you can see it better, like see it more easily on the page, go ahead and do that. That's fine, because you're always going to read that part of it, right? So let's look at the evidence itself and let's see how, if we look at the actual evidence the way it is right now, more than half of it, probably like 75% of it is what you would read in the debate. And that's a lot. So let's try to get that a lot shorter and more efficient. So again, we're looking for the claim, loss of fresh water destroys land, air, and water biodiversity, leading to mass extinction, including humans. So what's the first sentence? The growing human demand for water is decreasing the amount, quality, and availability of fresh water in our ecosystems. That's okay, but the uniqueness already says that, right? So we don't need to reread this if we've already read a piece of uniqueness. So we don't need to worry about this too much. Next sentence says, this is causing huge loss of biodiversity in ecosystems of all types and is also putting other species in danger of extinction. Again, the uniqueness already sort of says this, so we probably don't need to highlight this, but we might want to if we come back and decide it's important. Next sentence is, to understand how valuable fresh water is, consider that 97% of Earth's water is fresh water. I think that's good, that's important. We should maybe think about that though. The next sentence says, of that remaining 3% that is fresh water, over 67% of it is found in ice caps and glaciers, and just over 30% is groundwater. Next sentence says, only 0.3% of the world's water is fresh surface water. Okay, so this whole part here, this is a bunch of statistics about which parts of the world have fresh water and which don't, and how much it is. So all we want to know is how much fresh water there is. So that's what we want to highlight, right? Because we're going to say if the amount of fresh water in the world is only this much and we're losing it, we're going to be really, really close to being in danger. So all this other stuff about the parts of the world that aren't fresh water, they aren't really that important because that's not what we're focusing on. We're focusing on what parts of the world are fresh water. So now we know it's a really small part, right? Next sentence says, many species, including humans, depend on clean and accessible fresh surface water. Okay, I think that's pretty important because now we're establishing that if we only have a little bit of fresh water and everyone depends on it, that's really important. So we want to highlight that also. So of that whole paragraph, there's really only 2 parts we want to highlight, which says that there's not very much fresh water and everyone depends on it. So now we're getting to the point where we're going to be able to say loss of fresh water will destroy land, air, and water biodiversity and lead to mass extinction. Okay, next paragraph says, almost all land-based life, habitats, and ecosystems depend on fresh water. Sort of the same thing as the last sentence, but I think actually probably saying it better. So let's highlight this and unhighlight this, since they're basically saying the same thing, but this sentence is saying it better. Next sentence says, an estimated 126,000 known species rely completely on freshwater habits. Next sentence is more statistics, and it says this includes 15,000 fish species, 4,300 species of amphibians, 37% of all bird species are dependent on inland waters. So those are all statistics about different types of species that rely on fresh water. But that's just data that backs up the argument that we already have, that all land-based life, habitats, and ecosystems rely on fresh water. So this is just restating the same point, but in more detail. I don't think you need to read this as part of your main argument. This is maybe something you could bring up later in the debate if the other team challenges your impact or says it's not true, but this isn't actually helping the judge figure out why this is important. It's not super important to your argument. Next one says all non-marine species rely directly on fresh water, and even marine species rely heavily on these species to fill their roles in the ecosystem. I think this is pretty important because it's basically saying that everything fits together, right? So we want to be able to say even marine species that live underwater in the ocean, they'd be affected by losing fresh water also. Next sentence says, it goes without saying that human beings are also one of the species who depend on these species and may be on the extinction list if freshwater conditions get bad enough. Definitely want to say that because judges care about humans. They are humans. They don't want to go extinct, all right? And then it ends by saying all life is interconnected, and the center of that connection is clean, accessible, and plentiful fresh water. So again, I think that's really good. That drives the point home, makes it really clear. So now, this would be our evidence at the end of this argument. If we're trying to say that loss of freshwater destroys land, air, and water biodiversity by leading to mass extinction, what we have highlighted in here makes that argument. It makes the argument really clearly, and it makes it with a lot less time spent. So you'd probably spend about half as much time reading this evidence, but you wouldn't actually lose anything in terms of the argument you're trying to make. So I really strongly suggest that you go highlight your evidence, especially the 1AC and the 1NC, the most important speeches in the debate, so that you can see how to make your argument more efficiently, how to highlight the really important parts of your argument, and how to have more evidence and arguments read in your debate that'll make your overall story to the judge a lot stronger. So definitely do some highlighting, try it out, and do your best with it and try it in the debates. So good luck, debaters. Have fun.